wind power, but they aren't going to pay 8 compared to 25, 3 or 4 times more. Although in Europe they do, and it's important to note, in Europe and Japan, they're twice as efficient as we are. We, again, complacency, whatever you want to call it, we had it so cheap and easy, we're at pretty little heads about becoming more efficient. In Europe and Japan, they can produce $1 of GDP with half as much energy. So same quality of life, they've just done everything more efficiently and used more efficient motors and more efficient technologies. They've put their investment there into something, a tangible good, and are able to have a more efficient economy economically as well. And one of the fears that economists have is a new business gets ready to think, where am I going to locate in the world? Well, in the era of rising fuel costs, I think I want to be in an economy that uses energy efficiently, not one that has set up a system of such waste. So the opportunity is huge, but the point is, I alluded to, it's a change from a monopolistic system of regulation with these regulators. Nobody likes to tweak a system like that. It's not the innovative free market where new products just rise up and meet their death or not, and companies rise and fall with all that energy. It's a completely different system. And so we do have to work within that system if we accept that it is a monopoly. If you want to say, well, it should just be deregulated and everybody can go out and buy their own little generator, fine. I say to those folks, you are perfectly free to go out and spend, you bought a photovoltaic system, $20,000, $30,000 and put that on your roof. And that's an investment for you, but it's something some people can afford today, but the economy couldn't. I mean, the cost to just switch over to that kind of cost today is astronomical. I think, though, we can start planning that we're going to get there. So I have a couple steps that I think we in New Mexico should be looking at, especially to help that transition. And I was just sharing this map of all the coal plants in the United States. In New Mexico, I mentioned there are 2 big ones, San Juan and Four Corners up near Farmington. They're both about 1,500 megawatts, and they're comprised of 4 units. So actually, that is 4 separate turbines and 4 separate boilers. They're all lined up, stacked up next to each other. So it's a big box. If you've ever driven out past Shiprock there, you see it west of Farmington, and the smokestacks coming. You see 4 smokestacks in each one. They were built one at a time. They can be taken offline one at a time. They're each about 300 and some megawatts average. So each one goes down for scheduled maintenance independent of the others. So and they do it in the spring and the fall, which are the lower usage times, so they don't really disrupt what we have. And it's a great system. Let's think about those 8, and there's also one in Escalante. If you drive out to Gallup on I-40, you'll see it, another smokestack. And then there's a tiny one in Raton, and it's like 10 megawatts maybe, teensy tiny, so I'm not going to worry about that. But take those 2 big ones with 4 units apiece and call it 8. And think about, how do we get rid of 8 units of 300 megawatts apiece over 10 years? Okay. Before I go into slicing them off, which the utility is saying, oh, there's just no way, even at carbon at $100 a ton, there's just no way that can happen. So that's the response really from the entrenched interests who are, I think they are the groups that Vice President Gore was saying are the sclerosis. They're the ones that's just been this way, and to take off $250 million and just mothball it. Who can think of such a thing? And then bring on something new that's probably $500 million just to replace old with something new, like concentrating solar, at least. But over 10 years, let's develop a plan. But before I outline it, the first 2 or 3 phases, I was going to say every 2 years we can take one off. Let me touch on something really close to home that I've spent a little time on, and that's the Buckman direct diversion water pumping project here. I don't know if you're aware that it's going to add the city's actual electricity consumption currently is about 37 gigawatt hours, and running Buckman at full production will be 22 gigawatt hours. It's going not quite double, so it'll add 50%, let's call it, more, just to pump our water and treat it and bring it into the city. So for a city that signed on to Kyoto and said we're not going to increase our greenhouse gases, we're going to actually reduce them. And we're now talking over the course of 2011 to 2013, we're going to bring on that much new load while maybe we've done a few efficiencies in that period in City Hall. It's, for folks around town, we can't. We need the water, we want the water, it's the right technology. So what are the options to bring that water to us? We'll get into the question of how much that we should actually be conserving as well, but acknowledge that this new load, it's 2, 3, 4 megawatts depending on how many of the pieces of treatment you include. We can't just go out and put out a solar plant or some wind turbines down in the Buckman, in the drainage down there, or fill it with photovoltaics, that's acres. One thing we can do, and I think a lot of folks are interested now in talking about getting green energy in, off the grid. We could buy Sky Blue from P&M, whether we like P&M or not. We could buy green tags separately. We could just pay this 20% extra and bring that in. But there are even more opportunities, and I'm going to sort of describe just one piece of using that wind energy more optimally. But it applies in a number of other areas. And that is to embed information in the grid. The wind doesn't blow all the time. That's the complaint again, that's the status quo says, well, you need the power all the time. The lights have to come on. And the wind, you can't predict it. When's it going to blow? I mean, you can't just sit around and read while it's light and then the lights go out and you stop reading and wait for the lights for your computer to come back on. No, that's just a no-go. What you can do, though, with certain systems like water pumping is we need storage of energy, and this is one that looks pretty optimal. You can pump water when the wind is blowing, pump it uphill, store it uphill. That's a potential energy now that's stored up in some tank, and it can run downhill and release some of the energy, and that's something called pumped hydro is done in California, in fact. They move water, vast amounts of water around the California desert, and some of it when it goes back into Los Angeles, if you've ever gone up over the, coming in from the north there, you go up over the interstate and it drops back down and it runs generators. They've pumped it in out of the Owens Valley uphill with a lot of energy. Water pumping takes a lot of energy. They get some of it back. We can do that, and we can tie it to the wind directly. There can be a switch in our grid. Turbine starts turning, pump starts turning. These two, the technology exists today to have that happen. So do I care if that's intermittent for pumping water? In some cases, no. Especially if I have enough storage. But that energy, and there's a generic term for a broad spectrum of these kinds of technologies of allowing controls like that called the smart grid, where we have so much information available to appliances can turn on. Do you need your dishwasher to run just when you go to bed? What if it runs when the wind's blowing in the middle of the night? It can have a sensor. There have been a few little pilots of this around the country, and the discussion is growing, but it's innovative. Change, different, it might not work, it's risky, who's going to pay for it, ratepayers might not benefit, and those questions in this status, in this regulated monopoly structure that we have are challenging. So my plea to the audience, that I'm talking to broadly by being on the internet too, is say you want to see some innovation, that you're willing, that you think this industry and this infrastructure and this system could become more dynamic, and we might all benefit by changing that status quo that has developed in this industry. And just to talk also briefly about the nature of my work, I said I don't get to talk to audiences. I spend time in courtrooms talking with lawyers primarily, because a regulated monopoly is all about contracts and written agreements, and the number of lawyers involved in getting electricity is unbelievable. I would have had no... somebody would have asked me before I started doing this kind of work, how many do you think it takes from P&M to get your electricity? And I said, well, one that shows up maybe once a month. It's full time that there's a fleet of them, 2, 3, 4.